Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gabby and welcome to episode 4. So in True Knitting Podcast, we will go over my finished objects, my works in progress, and some of my future plans, and some acquisitions fall into that as well. Let's go ahead and get started. So let's talk about what I'm wearing. My king salmon. You've seen her before. She was a finished object in my last video, but it wasn't fully blocked. Now she's fully blocked. I've worn it a couple of times. It's fabulous. Everything that I was worried about is not a problem. Like the bagginess in the short rows, I was having some tension issues with that. It fully fixed itself with blocking, and I have to say, it's probably one of my favorite things I've ever made. I'll get into some of the details with it, but if you want to hear a more in-depth conversation about this sweater, check out my last podcast video where I talk about all the details. But just a rundown, I knit the size 4, and this is knit in Barocco Remix. The main color is Buttercup and the contrast color is Juniper. And I have to say, this yarn is fantastic if you have sensitive skin like me, specifically to wool or alpaca, because this doesn't contain any wool or alpaca in this yarn, and it's really, really nice. It has like a nice tweedy look to it too. The knitting process with it is really nice as well. I pretty much followed this fully to pattern except for the decrease rate on the sleeves. In all the pattern photos, it seemed to be a little bit tighter than what I would prefer, so I just didn't do as many decreases, and I think it looks great. And it's also very exciting because this is my submission for the Fish Girl Fall Make-Along with Young Folk Knits and designed by so-and-so. So if you want to see my posts on Instagram, follow me at handmadebygib. If you want to see any other details as well, check out my Ravelry. Another thing that's really exciting too is that Barocco's official Instagram reposted my photo, which is so cool. I've never had a feature like that before. Anyways, let's go on to my other finished object. So my only other finished object for this episode is my hipster hat by Petite Knit, and this is for my daughter Rowan. Can we talk about how cute and small it is? Oh my goodness, I love it. It fits her great. I will say it's just one big tube basically. So I fold it twice and it fits her really nicely. I'm talking about you. Yeah. So I knit the size baby on 3.5mm needles, which is what's recommended for the pattern. And I knit this in Sandnes Garn Perfect, which is a mix of 80% wool and 20% nylon, in the color 8581. I will say I knit a little bit longer than the recommended length for the size baby, but it wasn't quite the length recommended for the child size. I just thought that maybe she would be able to wear it longer with the extra length. I'm not sure if that's true, but I guess we'll see. I'm really happy to have finally used up this yarn because I initially got this for a pair of Sunday socks for my boyfriend Tyler. That did not work out. I'm not very much a sock fan. You can check out one of my other podcasts that I talk about this. I think it's my second one. Very excited to have this yarn used up. Although, I will say, I still have a half a ball and then a full finished sock worth of yarn. So I might be able to get another hat out of that, or I might use it as a contrast color in something. I was considering making the mood beanie with it. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure that I have enough for that now. But anyways, so that will just sit in my stash until I figure out what to do with it. But I am happy to at least have a finished object, official finished object, with that yarn. It was nice to work with. It's really stretchy, and I think with the nylon it's gonna make it last a long time, and obviously it looks really cute on my daughter. So yeah, really excited about that. It's a good palette cleanser between all these big projects that I've been working on as well. Okay, so let's get into my works in progress. Now we have a lot to talk about when it comes to my whips. The one I have the most to say about, we'll start with, which is my Lana vest by Irene Lynn. So here she is. Gorgeous. Holy cow. Yeah, this is my first cable project and my first vest project, and I mean, it just speaks for itself. Can you spot the mistake I made in one of my braided cables? I'll point it out to you. I'm honestly not too worried about that because it's on the back. Let me get into all the details and all the specs before we get into all of that. So I'm knitting the size 1, and I'm knitting the body on 5mm needles, and I'm knitting this in Barocco Vintage in the color Marmalade. This is a mix of 52% acrylic, 40% wool, and 8% nylon. I had 1.5 skeins of Marmalade left over from my Plume pullover, and I loved the color on its own, so I was like, I have to make something with this because it's such a beautiful color. It deserves its own project, right? So yeah, I saw that Knit Cheek and Love of Fibers are hosting a Fall for Vests knit along. So I was like, I've been wanting to make the Lana vest, and what better time to do it than now? So since I had a skein and a half left over from my Plume, I purchased 2 more balls of yarn, and I purchased these from my local yarn store. Now, they only had 1 skein in store, so we had to do an order and it was sent to my house. So it came from Barocco directly, and it's a completely different dye lot. Of course, I expected it to be different, but when I received it, like comparing the old one versus the new one I just received, there was a pretty significant difference, and it was mainly just that it was not quite as saturated, and it had a little bit less of like red flecks in it, which is one of my favorite parts about this color. Is it's I don't want to say it's heathered, but it does have a little bit of like variation in the yarn, and there was a lot less red in the new one, so I was so worried that it was going to be really obvious where I changed skeins. So I started it with the old dye lot, and I was able to finish the entire back panel, and then I picked up both sides for the shoulders and then connected in the round, and I was able to use up all of the old dye lot with that. And since I was really concerned about the color difference, I decided to alternate skeins on for about 20 rows, I would say. I think it blends in pretty well. I don't think you can really tell. It's so hard to see because it looks so different in different lighting. Can we talk about how cute this little Eevee bag is to hold my yarn, by the way? So cute. But yeah, let me see if I can show you. So it was around here is where I introduced my new skein, and I alternated until about this point, and then from here down is the new color. So it's really about like halfway through the body. I don't think you can tell. I don't think so. But it's so interesting. Like in the skeins, it looked very obvious. And maybe it does. I'm not sure if the camera is picking it up. But anyways, as much as I've worried about it, I don't really care if it's going to be obvious at all because there's not much I can do about it at this point. And since it's such a textured project, I think that kind of helps with the blending even more. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, about the messed up cables. So I originally messed up one of the 4-stitch cables. It was supposed to be right leaning and I made it left leaning. That is really obvious. And it was like right on the front shoulder. So I was like, I have to fix it. And I was really scared to do that because in order to do that, like you have to ladder back and then also like keep track of rows of like where the switch happened. And this being my first like cable knit fully textured project, I was just really nervous about that. But I followed the tutorial. I'll link it below. And then I was also so proud of myself for being able to fix that. Now I did get lucky because I realized it before I did my next crossover. So there was just, so many rows of stockinette that I had to pull back on. So I didn't have to ladder back through multiple cables. So I think that made it a little bit less intimidating. But even still, like when you're doing that and you see like these huge rows of like loose yarn, it's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But it turned out fine. Then I messed up again on the braided cable this time. And since it's on the back, I was like, does it really matter? Because it is obvious, but I think because the whole thing is so textured, like you're not really gonna hone in on the mistake that I made, especially on the back. And if somebody does notice, then it's like, well, this is handmade, and it kind of adds to the character and the charm to it. So I'm like, okay. So I made a poll on Instagram asking if I should fix it or if I should just leave it. And pretty much every single person voted to just keep it. So she's staying. I think it adds to the character because it is handmade. And to be quite honest with you, I'm also a little bit scared to like ladder back and fix that because, to make the braided cable, you have to like alternate which way you're switching your stitches. And that's just like really scary to me to like try to ladder back on. So because I think it's sweet, we're gonna keep it. And because I'm scared of it, we're gonna keep it. I will say, as much fun as like a textured project has been to work on, I did slow down quite a bit on that because I was just really craving like stockinette. Once I connected in the round, everything started to become so slow. So I needed a little break from that. And so this leads me into my next work in progress, which is The Weekender by Andrea Mowry. Now, when I first showed this to you in my last podcast, I had just started on the back ribbing. like I said, I was really craving stockinette, so I finished the whole body. Oopsies. Stockinette is just so much faster. It's so much faster. And what's cool is the right side of the work is reverse stockinette, but you basically knit it backwards. So you're just knitting stockinette in the round until you split for the sleeves. So it just makes it go by so quickly, which I love. And so here we are with a full body. So let's get into the details. I'm knitting the size 3, and I knit the ribbing on 4mm needles and the body on 4.5, and I'm knitting this in Barocco Remix in the color Juniper. So this is the other sweater quantity that I got off of Facebook Marketplace. I originally also got Buttercup with it too. I did the math when I wanted to make my king salmon, where I was able to figure out that I could make a king salmon if I did Buttercup as the main color and Juniper as the contrast color, and then I would also be able to get another sweater out of the rest of Juniper that I had. So that's the Weekender. It also helped to see on the project pages on Ravelry that a lot of people were using Barocco Remix for this project. So I knew that it was going to turn out great because of that. What also is kind of funny is the King Salmon and the Weekender both call for Brooklyn Tweed Shelter. And I've seen that a lot of people will use Remix in place of Shelter because it kind of has a similar vibe to it, like with the tweediness. More on that later. We'll talk about that with acquisitions. But yeah, okay. So the Weekender is a bottom-up construction, which a lot of people don't like, but let me be real with you. Like, first of all, it makes me really like sentimental about the first sweater I ever made, which I knit in panels bottom up. So that's kind of sweet. What's also really nice is, for me, I think the worst part about making a sweater is binding off the body because it takes so long, especially if you're doing like a sewn bind off, like an Italian bind off, which is what I typically do. So I will say it is really nice to start with the ribbing. Now, this pattern calls for a tubular cast on. I can't be bothered, so I just did a long tail cast on. And just knowing that I don't have to bind off the body is like, that was so, the whole time I'm knitting this, I'm like, wow, I'm so happy I don't have to do that. Because the only binding off you have to do is when you connect the shoulders. So, which this pattern calls for a 3 needle bind off, which I had never done before. And it was really easy. I don't know why I was like scared of it, but it turned out really nice, like with the exposed seam. I'll show you a close up of that. So yeah, so you knit some ribbing at the top and then you connect it with an exposed seam at the shoulders. And I think it looks really nice. Like, that's such an Andrea Mowry touch. I feel like she's done that in quite a few of her patterns, like with the ribbing at the top and the exposed seam at the shoulders. And this is my first Andrea Mowry pattern too, which is really exciting. I have loved her patterns for a very long time, and so I'm really excited to be knitting one. Just like I expected, the pattern is super clearly written, it's extremely straightforward, and she has a bunch of like YouTube links to say like the 3 needle bind off that I wasn't sure how to do. She has a great video on how to do that. So a note on the modifications that I've made so far is I have not knit the body as long as the pattern recommends, which I believe is around like 15 inches. I decided to do 10 inches from the underarm to, I measured to the back ribbing, which is a little bit longer than the front ribbing. And I find that that's like a perfect cropped length on me right now. I also noticed that the sleeves are meant to be a bit tighter on this pattern, and I don't really prefer that. How it starts is you start with the 2 ribbing pieces and then you connect those together and then you knit in the round for the body, right? So I knit that to be 10 inches. And then when you split for the sleeves, so you start knitting flat on the front and back panels. So I decided to knit the next size up. So I knit the size 5 in terms of recommendation for the sleeve length or the sleeve width. And I will say I could have gone up another size because I don't think it's necessarily going to be tight, but it's not as roomy as I thought it would be. So just keep that in mind if you knit this pattern and you don't want your sleeves to be tight. Maybe consider going up 2 sizes. And I think because of that, I'm also not going to do the recommended amount of decreases on the sleeves, just so I can leave a little bit more room in there. But we'll see when we get there. And yeah, I'm really excited for this to be a finished object because it's gonna be a really great like simple sweater in my wardrobe, like a great staple. And like I said, I love the yarn. You'll see I also have plans to use Remix for another project. I'm very much a pattern repeater and very much a yarn repeater. So just a heads up on that. But yeah, so that's my Weekender by Andrea Mowry. Very excited to get that done. And I need to go grab my next whip. Hang on. So this brings me to my last work in progress. And this is my step-by-step sweater by Florence Miller for my boyfriend Tyler. Now, you'll be proud of me. I have done a lot of work on this. But once again, I have lost steam and we'll get into that. But I am knitting the size 5 and I knit the ribbing in 4.5 millimeter needles and the body is knit in 5.5. And I'm knitting this in Drops Nepal in the color 8906. Yeah, okay, let me show you. Wow, amazing. So I've gotten to the point where I can do the ribbing. The last time I measured this, I had Tyler try it on and I needed about 5 more inches on the body. So I decided to do 3 more inches on the body and then I'm gonna do 2 inches of ribbing. So I just need to switch to my smaller needle and then we can get a move on that. Okay, so I lost steam on this because now I'm concerned that I'm not gonna have enough yarn. Which is kind of crazy because I bought like 15 balls of this. So now I'm at the point where once I do the ribbing, that's gonna take like a full ball in itself. And then after that, I'm only gonna have 4 balls of yarn left. And I have to do 2 sleeves for a very tall boy. So I am a little bit concerned and I've lost steam because of that. I've really been focusing on my Weekender, so oopsies. I wanted to have this kind of done by Tyler's birthday. That has since passed. Yeah, are you sensing a theme here? I'm very off my timeline with this, but that's okay because now I'm gonna give myself until around Christmas time to hopefully have this done. I think it makes sense just because it's gonna be really cold and it's a wool and alpaca mix anyways. But yeah, so it's a very warm yarn. I don't think he's really gonna be able to wear this until it's like super cold anyways. So maybe that's just me coping as an excuse to like, oh, it's fine that it's been taking so long, but whatever, we'll get there. I just need to do the ribbing and then I can just kind of see how we're doing on yarn and go from there. Worst case, I have to order more. That's kind of an issue for me here too, because let's talk about my future plans. There's been a shift in that as well. And that is because, as you may know, I am on the search for the perfect Olga sweater. And I've knit 4 different versions and they all have their qualms. So I had the idea that I need to make this in like a cotton merino blend. And so I decided to order Drops Cotton Merino in the color Pistachio Ice and Dark Green because I think those will look really nice together. And I ordered them from Linda Hobby, which I have never had an issue with until this order. Okay, here's the tea. So I ordered 10 balls and mind you, it's coming from Denmark, so it takes a long time anyways. But I received a call from FedEx and they were informing me that my package got severely damaged in transit and that there was only 1 ball of yarn left in my package. So that's super disappointing. I expected that they would send it back, but they didn't. And it showed up at my house a few days later, covered in tape, because, I mean, the package was completely ripped open. And sure enough, there was only 1 ball of yarn left. That was Pistachio Ice. I'll show you that, actually. It's right behind me, which is a beautiful color. I kind of figured it would be like a nice soft green, and it's exactly what I figured. But unfortunately, I'm missing the rest of the yarn I need to make this sweater. So I reached out to them 3 different times in 3 different ways. And I still have yet to hear anything back, and it's been a week since I initially reached out to them. So I'm a little bit disappointed in that. I have never had issues with them before, and I've ordered from them many times. So we'll see if that gets resolved. But it has me kind of shifting my mindset of using a different yarn for my perfect Olga. So that brings me to my consideration of using Barocco Remix Light. So their light version is more of a DK, and their regular remix is more of like a worsted weight gauge. Since I know I like the yarn and I can tolerate it well, I have intentions of making my next Olga with Barocco Remix Light. I was looking into this because I originally acquired Remix from Facebook Marketplace because it's just a great way to get yarn for cheap and people are destashing all the time, so I'm constantly scrolling Facebook Marketplace for yarn. Since I acquired it on Facebook Marketplace, I didn't really know anything about it. I just saw it for cheap and I saw 2 sweater quantities and I said, thank you, add to cart. Upon further research, I was really curious because it doesn't contain any natural fibers. It's a mix of pretty much everything else. And come to find out, it is a blend of recycled fibers, mainly from like finished garments. And so they shred them up and separate them by color and then make a new yarn out of that, which makes my little heart feel better about not using natural fibers, because I hate contributing to the fact that there's enough plastic in this world, right? So I feel a little bit better knowing that this is made out of recycled fibers. And because of that, it kind of gives it this really cool tweedy look. So we're leaning into it, and I think my next Olga will be in Remix Light. They have a bunch of wonderful colors as well. So just like I was thinking with what I thought was going to be with Drops Cotton Merino, I'm gonna choose 2 similar color yarns. So it's like a little bit lower contrast. That's kind of my thought process. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. I'm trying to turn an unfortunate situation into something positive, and we're just gonna lean into the yarn that I know that I like, because that's just how I am. So I will say, if you are very sensitive to natural fibers like I am, I highly recommend looking into Barocco Remix. 1, because it's great for sensitive skin, and 2, you can feel better about using a yarn that contains acrylic and non-natural fibers. Yeah, so there's that. So the next plan I am kind of thinking, leaning into this whole Facebook Marketplace thing, I found a listing that had 4 skeins of Brooklyn Tweed Shelter in the color wool socks for a pretty good deal. And since I've knit, well, I haven't quite finished my weekender, but since I have used 2 patterns that call for shelter, I wanted to see what it was all about. And since I know that I'm very sensitive to wool, I thought maybe I could make like a jacket or cardigan pattern using this yarn. Since that's more of like a layering garment, it won't be next to skin necessarily. So once again, I'm considering another striped garment. What a surprise. I'm so predictable. And I'm considering knitting the Olga jacket. I purchased 4 skeins on Facebook Marketplace, and then I started scouring the internet for 4 more skeins in a color that would go well with it. Now, wool socks is very much like a rusty, it's a very me color, very rusty, tweedy, really beautiful color yarn. I have been wanting to make a sweater with purple, like a nice deep rich purple. So I scoured the internet to find shelter in like a purple color, which I did. It was really hard to find, actually. I had to like really dig deep for this, and I found 4 skeins available at Wild Knits in Salem, Oregon. So I just ordered from their website. It's a really, really beautiful color, but it's just a lot darker than what I expected it to be. But I think we're just gonna roll with it. It's technically a worsted weight yarn, but on the label, it showed that you can hit like a 20 stitch gauge with 4.5mm needles. So that's what I did my swatch in. I did a cute little swatch. It's really tiny, but I just, 1, wanted to see how the 2 colors would look together, and 2, wanted to see what my gauge would be. And with 4.5mm needles, I was able to get 20 stitches by 32 rows per 4 inches. The Olga patterns call for 20 stitches by 30 rows. So my row gauge is a little bit tighter. I think it's gonna be okay, because one thing I really like about the Olga sweater is it goes based off of measurements, not necessarily like how many rows you need to do. I've also seen 2 projects on Ravelry that use shelter for the Olga jacket. So I, in my brain, am telling myself that this is gonna be fine. We'll see. I'm a little nervous now that 8 skeins is not going to be enough because they're 50-gram skeins, but we might just start and just see what happens. The only thing is it's a little bit difficult to find this yarn because they're not making it anymore, and now I'm worried I won't have enough. We're just gonna cast on and we're gonna go with it and see what happens. So whatever. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be really pretty, I will say. I do like the 2 colors together, although I probably wouldn't have chosen such a dark purple, but we're gonna roll with it. So this brings me to my last future plan, which I have decided what I'm using for my Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino that I now have because I frogged my Stornoway sweater. I have 8.5 balls of yarn now, and I have been so like back and forth on what I want to do with it. It's so hard to find a pattern that just uses the heavy merino by itself. I don't necessarily want to buy mohair because it's expensive, and 2, I'm not sure that I could really handle it. I did find a pattern. So I think what I'm going to make with it is the dad sweater by Emily Curtis. It's a really beautiful pattern that kind of looks like, it's kind of giving sweatshirt vibes. And I really love the shaping of the armhole. And I also really love the sentiment of like it fitting like your dad's sweater, which I think is really cute. So that's kind of my plan for that. That's kind of a distant plan because after I finish my Lana vest and my weekender, I'll probably lean into like an Olga jacket kind of vibe. And I'm not sure if I want to actually purchase the Olga jacket pattern because I can't imagine that it's really that much different in terms of like recommended lengths and stuff like that. It would just be really nice to have directions on like how to pick up for the button band and what exactly is recommended for knitting it flat instead of in the round. So I'm not sure if I want to hack the Olga sweater pattern since I already have it. Let me know if you have done that and if you can give me any guidance on how exactly to hack that. That would be very appreciated. But yeah, so we'll probably focus on the Olga first. I guess now I have to buy new yarn for my other perfect Olga sweater. Is this getting confusing? Too many Olgas. I just love the pattern. I love a good striped sweater. Like no matter what patterns I'm looking at, like I always gravitate towards like sweaters that are striped. It's so funny. But anyways, that pretty much concludes everything. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to me ramble about Olga sweaters for an hour. And also it's getting a little bit stormy outside too, so the lighting is not as good as it was when I first started filming, so I'm sorry about that as well. But anyways, so that brings us to the end. Rowan's over it too. So that brings us to the end of this video. I just want to mention, if you want to keep up with what I'm doing in between videos, you can follow me on Instagram at handmadebygib. You can also find me on Ravelry at emo granola girl. I'll have those linked in the description. And another thing I wanted to touch on is I created a Ko-fi, and basically it's just a way that you can help support me directly, and anything I receive from that will go towards the channel, like patterns or yarn or maybe upgrading my filming situation. But yeah, if you feel inclined, the link is below. It would be super appreciated if you feel inclined to do so. I'll just leave that there. And another thing is I created a wish list on Ravelry, so if you at all feel inclined to gift a pattern that would support me directly as well, that would also be super appreciated. No pressure, just gonna leave it there. And also consider subscribing if you want to keep up with my videos and hear me ramble about things I'm excited about. Because that's why we're here, right? Anywho, so I just wanted to thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you in my next video.